Hello governors and welcome to a new pre-commander release simulation. I'm Murph and this is the Rock Battle Simulator channel, the only place where you can find out how good commanders are before you see them perform in game. The new infantry commanders will be released in Rise of Kingdoms next week. We have Pakal in MGE and this guy here, Chiok, in Wheel of Fortune event. Let's see what we know about Pakal, explore the battle setup, pair him with other commanders, and most importantly, can he beat Zenobia? First, in the good old infantry commander release fashion, the game developers are a bit sketchy about describing what this commander can do. You can see here the pre-release description of his expertise skill, and this is what we have in-game at the moment. Here on the right side, you can see my conversation with someone from the game support, and you see I'm asking them what we see right now in Pakal's skill description, is that correct and up to date? And they say will be repaired later, sorry for the inconvenience caused. We might discover different mechanics when we see him in game. The simulation is based on my interpretation of the skill descriptions that we see in the game right now before release. So let's have a look at the battle setup. Okay, so the main candidate to pair with Pakal is Harold. And the reason is simple. Harold has his Varangian Guard skill that gives him a big boost in attack, but then cuts off his defense by the same amount. He has some partial immunity, but what Pakal does is he will entirely clear the defensive debuff. So yeah, that's a good hint that they should work very well together. But now let's forget about Harold for a moment and just focus on Pakal. So every row you see here is 1 second in the battle, and events here will unfold similar to what you see in a battle report. So first you see that this is the active skill, 1300 damage factor, which is decent but not extraordinary. He also has a 500 damage factor shield, and one thing I need to mention about shields, they're not included in the simulator. I just added the effect here so you can see it, so that you don't think I forgot about it. But it's not going to play any role in the simulation because I still need to work on how shields work. But let me give you some insight of what we know so far. Shields are correlated with how many troops you have. So even though they don't technically rely on high defense or high health to produce a stronger shield, if you have higher defense and health, you usually tend to have more troops in your march, which will boost the shield. So I think the key takeaway is as long as you have many troops in your march or in your rally, the shield will be more effective. If you're gonna be in a losing situation, your shield will definitely not work as you want it. 500 damage factor for a shield is not extraordinary, so I don't expect this to have an incredible impact in the overall performance of Pakal. It's definitely not the main feature of his skill setup. So one final note on the shield. Whatever the results will be, as you will see them described in this simulation, just keep in mind that in game, the expectation is that he's actually a bit better than what you see in the simulator, because in game he will have the shield, while in the simulator he will not have it. Now, let's move on to the next skill. He gets 30% health, which is described somewhere over here, but he also gets an all damage bonus when rallying. Then for his third skill, 40% attack boost for infantry, which only applies to rallying cities and strongholds, and the clear effect that we mentioned earlier. So every 10 seconds or so he gets 20% chance, if I remember correctly, to clear any debuffs. What's not clear to me yet is if this applies only to rallies or attacks versus cities and strongholds, or does it apply in open field combat as well. I think it only applies to cities and strongholds, because I think the entire skill, the third skill, Divine Sovereignty, only applies to those situations. But we'll have to see in game if that's right. This is a simulation for rally versus garrison, so there's no negative impact here. His fourth skill makes him very tanky. So first of all, he gets a clear 10% all damage taken reduction, always applies, and also an additional at least 5% reduction when he is surrounded. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this will work, but maybe he gets 5% damage reduction in a 1 versus 1 situation because the description says he gets at most 6 stacks times 5%, which means if it applies only when 2 enemies attack, then the minimum would be 10%. So maybe the actual minimum is the 5% mentioned in the description when there's only 1 army attacking Pakal. Now, his expertise in its current format is very interesting. First of all, he gets a flat 20% increase in counterattack damage bonus, but then also gets a 5% all damage taken reduction whenever a skill is used. Now, this could trigger only when he uses his own skill, but what I think is more likely is whenever an active skill gets triggered, be it from Pakal or from his pairing commander, this has a chance to go off. There is a 5% cooldown and the total duration is 3 seconds, so you might be wondering how come we have this in the first 3 turns in this example. It's because he's paired with Mr. Harold here. He has that skill that makes his active skill to proc again randomly, which in turn should trigger this all damage taken reduction effect in Pakal's expertise. Then the cooldown starts and 5 seconds later he can get the effect again if there's another active skill that procs, and so on and so forth. Alright, so let's try to answer the burning question. Can Harold and Pakal defeat Zenobia? Now, before we start, I received a lot of suggestions to replace Theodora in this combination with YSS. The reason why I keep avoiding this is because YSS also has a 500 damage factor shield, and that would not be part of the simulation for the reasons I explained earlier. However, if something cannot beat Zenobia and Theodora, they definitely cannot beat Zenobia and YSS. They are very similar in how they behave in combat. The big difference between them is that YSS gets the all damage boost when troops remaining in garrison are less than 50%. And in very long rallies, that counts a lot. Okay, so since they are both infantry, we have the luxury of giving them the exact same set of equipment. You can see the stats here for attack, defense, and health. Let's see who wins. Okay, so let's look at a pointer here. Right, it's quite low. Just so you get a better idea of what to expect, in similar tests with Nebu and Ramses for archers, or Zhang Yu and Chandra, or Zhang Yu and William versus Zenobia and Theodora, so again, with very similar equipment, the results we saw were also very low. It was like 7-8% win rate. Right now, Harold and Pakal are struggling at 3-4%, so yeah, they don't look to be very well prepared to take on Zenobia and Theodora in a 1 versus 1 situation. But as I said, they become stronger if they get swarmed by weak marches. So if you're in a situation where you're either dominating the field, it's definitely a good rally to hit Zenobia and Theodora, or also if you rally deep inside enemy territory, or if they are not inspired and they start swarming you, you're gonna cause so much additional damage. And actually, let's test that. Let's simulate and see if we get significantly increased performance from Harold and Pakal if they get swarmed by maybe 1 or 2 marches that are not very strong, because if they're very, very strong, they might actually take a lot of their units and fighting power along with it. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, they're now set up as if they get attacked by an additional march, so they're attacking the garrison and then an enemy march attacks them as well. So that should count as 2 units surrounding. The impact is going to be 300 additional damage factor for Harold from his active skill, 2% extra counterattack damage for one of his passive skills, and then from Pakal, that's an additional 5% all damage taken reduction. Oh wow, okay. look at this needle now. It really went up all of a sudden. Now it's trying to stabilize around 45-50%. This is impressive. I mean, I wasn't expecting such a small act of, attacking this pair would generate this big of an effect. But please do keep in mind that I'm not computing also the damage that they receive from this secondary march, just the bonuses that they get. So I think for one march to attack them, the damage that they're going to take is going to be insignificant compared to the output. But, if more marches swarm them, and I don't know, big whale marches, 300, 400,000 troops each, they will probably die off eventually. But when those people will look at the reports, they might have a surprise because they're going to receive so much damage from counterattacks, and they're going to activate the damage reduction effects from Pakal. So really, they are formidable. When they are swarmed, you better swarm them hard enough to take them down. Otherwise, you're going to have so many problems trying to help your garrison, and actually you're doing more harm. You're doing more harm to your garrison if you're not swarming them hard enough, and you're doing harm to your own marches. Actually, let me just rephrase that into simply try not to swarm them. You saw in the 1 versus 1 situation, they're not doing very good. So if you have a strong garrison, and even if you dominate the field, you should probably refrain from swarming them down. If you have a counter rally, that's going to be a very tricky situation, because it better be very decisive, very strong counter rally. So I think the big problem that Harold and Pakal will have is not being able, in a equal 1 versus 1 situation with a very strong garrison, they will not be able to hold their own. But they might get some unexpected help from enemies trying to swarm them down, and then they become very powerful, and then this happens, 49% win rate from, 2-3% without the swarm effects applied. So is this the next rally meta combination? It could be. So in certain situations, in certain scenarios, it could definitely be. I think they're going to be extremely good in Ark of Osiris, where swarming is something usual. And if the garrison is not very strong, they're good in a 1-to-1 situation as well. I'm absolutely sure that they'll do great against Jadwiga, and I don't expect them to have problems against Wu Zetian. So yeah, Zenobia and Theodora, and Zenobia and YSS would be their main opponents, which in some circumstances will become manageable and enables a lot of different strategies and tactics to take the garrison down. So now let's get to our next test and try to answer the next question, which is, will Pakal do better with other infantry commanders when rallying? So within the population of infantry commanders, we have already some rally choices, like Guan Yu and Harold, or Guan Yu and Leonidas. These are the preferred choices, I would say. There's another Harold with Alex, which I haven't included because Alex has a shield, and as I said, I'm not simulating shields yet, so that result will be extremely skewed if I would include it. But, having as comparison the Guan Yu Harold and the Guan Yu Leonidas will be sufficient. Now, these two marches, they're very lackluster when it comes to performing against Zenobia and Theodora, so they would simply be unable to face them with an equal sort of gear. So that's why I have given, for the following tests, I have given Zenobia and Theodora low tier gear. It's all blues, and I'm going to keep every march, that every rally that they're going to face, where Pakal is going to be a member, I'm going to give it top-end equipment. These two guys, or these three guys, also received this set of gear, and they faced Zenobia and Theodora with this gear, and these are their results. So we're going to use these as benchmark for infantry rallies for the pre-Pakal era. And you can see Guan Yu and Harold outperformed Guan Yu and Leonidas. So in a similar situation, let's see what Harold and Pakal can do. I'm going to remove the surrounding effects. So this is going to be again a 1 versus 1. Let's have a look. So remember, the number or the performance that they have to beat is 18% win rate, and it's right now it's at 100%. Wow, this is insane. Guan Yu and Harold were doing 18%, Leonidas were doing less than that, and these guys are doing 98-99% against a weak Zenobia and Theodora. I guess we could have expected this after seeing the equally powered gear test previously. And remember, this time they don't have any surrounding bonuses. It's a pure 1 versus 1 situation. Harold and Pakal, they're definitely outscoring what we previously thought to be the best infantry commander rally combinations. And you know, the truth is, infantry rallies on Zenobia were like a very last resort. Like if you had nothing else better, you didn't have Nebu and Ramses, or Ramses and YSG, or then Zhang Yu plus Chandra, or Zhang Yu plus William. Really, that's maybe even, I'm not sure, maybe even Attila Takeda would have done better than Guan Yu with Harold, or Guan Yu with Leonidas, or Alex with Harold. So yeah, this is definitely a big change in the infantry rally meta. So seeing that they perform so well, I'm wondering, what if we do Pakal primary? And I'm just gonna fast forward that test and we just look at the numbers and see if we derive some additional conclusions from that. Okay, same setup with the low tier gear for Zenobia and Theodora. Pakal paired with CJ, and let's go. Let's see, 29-30%. It's kind of stagnating around that. Okay, it's going down now. Okay, well, I think what this means is they're doing similar or better than Guan Yu and Harold, or Guan Yu and Leonidas, which is something to be appreciated, right? It's we couldn't really rally efficiently with infantry, a Zenobia-led garrison. So having better performance from Pakal and CJ is a step forward. Of course, they're not as good as Pakal and Harold. Even though a good setup between Pakal and CJ was not so obvious, it looks like they can do a decent job against a very low tier Zenobia. They might do the work, and we can get a look at the final result. Alright, we're back to the dashboard. So Pakal and CJ, definitely not top performance, but they're still doing better than the previous best choice rally combinations. Okay, so now I'll just snap my fingers and you're gonna see the results for these two, and then we'll jump to conclusions. Okay, I'm back, and before we discuss the results of these two pairs, I just want to make a correction. This was actually from a simulation where I was looking at what happens if the Desperate Elegy talent is on and the rally holds on for a very long time. So I don't want to mislead you guys, I need to make that mention. He is fully invested in defense, and it's a very long rally, so the Desperate Elegy effects apply for a very long time. But we'll discuss more about this in the various talent setups video. Right now, let's focus on these other pairs. So Guan Yu and Pakal, they are the runner-up. So if you don't have Harold and you have Guan Yu, which is a very, very popular commander, then I guess you're set up with the second best infantry rally. Yeah, that's how it looks like. Pakal and Leonidas, disappointing, and basically there's no synergy between them. They're both very defensive. I really expect that they're gonna do a much better job in the open field. Unfortunately, they don't do any debuffs. They're like punching bags together. They need someone with a big punch like Guan Yu and Harold or even CJ. So yeah, I don't think this is a good pair, and that's what the simulations are showing us. Not a good pair for rallying Zenobia, at least. So there you have it. This is the infantry rally comparison. Before we close, let's look at the broader rally meta so we can see the bigger picture. 1 versus 1 efficiency versus full top gear Zenobia garrison. So it's Zenobia and Theodora against all three of these pairs. As you can see, the Zhang Yu typically does the most damage in a simple 1 versus 1 situation. And then Nebu and Ramses are very close behind. This is a natural counter to Zenobia. While Harold and Pakal, they're not really top performers, but they're going to be the third best choice if you just go on a pure 1 versus 1 situation. We do know that that almost never happens in combat. There's always going to be someone who swarms, or there's going to be reinforcement, and certain skills will trigger in a different way when you have all the complexity of multiple armies clashing on the battlefield. Just take this as a relative strength index, but please do consider that this 2.9% you see here, so this green line, is gonna go much higher if Harold and Pakal are swarmed by at least 1 week march. So if you have 2 week marches, you're actually doing them a big favor. If you have 3 week marches, again, you're doing them a very big favor. Maybe, I don't know, starting with 4 strong marches, or maybe a counter rally or 2 counter rallies, that's going to take them down. But yeah, this is very complex, and I really love the dynamics of this. The game developers have given us, through Harold and Pakal, a very good tool to exploit some of the weaknesses that the enemy might have, in knowledge of the game, in understanding how commanders function. And we still see Attila and Takeda being swarmed after like 1 year, 1.5 years. How long has it been since they were released? Yeah, I'm expecting to see that sort of error of judgment take effect also for Harold and Pakal. And yeah, if that happens, this green line is gonna go beyond what you see here for archers and cav rallies. So this is the impact that I'm expecting to see based on the simulations with the introduction of Pakal and how he pairs with Harold. That's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. A lot of work and thinking went into completing these simulations. And remember, guys, this is the only channel you're gonna find on YouTube, as far as I know at least, that looks at the game through the lens of simulations based on commander skills and talents undergoing battle in a very similar way to what you see in-game. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, tell your friends about it, share the link, because this is the place where you can see if something is gonna be game-changing before it actually hits the game. Thank you for watching, take care, and cheers!